Welcome back to Quantum Council. Yes, we have just talked about Iran and Israel attack, and now we're gonna move on a bit closer to home, where Japan, Philippines, and United States of America made an unprecedented trilateral talks in, I think, in Washington. So it's between these three prime minister and. They were basically talking about how to deter China and how to bolster maritime security in the most contested nine-dash line claimed by China. So there were talks also about Japan joining AUKUS. This is a defense of Australia, UK, US that going to patrol this area, including this South China Sea. So, what's your initial reaction to this trilateral?
I think it's quite natural to see this happening here, because the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is essentially following the legacy of the LDP here, the Liberal Democratic Party, and its previous Prime Minister, the late Shinzo Abe, in trying to balance out China, because Japan has made attempts in the past decade to re-establish its position vis-a-vis Beijing, to ensure that they are not to be be thrown around here and there. Of course, Japan has always had the backing of the United States military to assist them, but with the push for remilitarizing the Japanese Defense Force, this is just Japan trying to seek out more avenues in terms of cooperation in the maritime sense. Japan has always been trying to inch closer towards the Southeast Asian countries to back them up amidst all these security concerns, and which is very much justified. Like if you see, China has for the past 20 years been poking and prodding a lot of the countries in the South China Sea, testing how far they can go by sending their boats in and then having some kind of confrontation happening. So it's natural that Japan would take the initiative, and I think America as well would benefit from taking such initiative as well, because we saw that with the past Philippine president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, having a sort of a ping pong stance on China, at one point being very pro-China, and now we have his successor, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who definitely has taken a very China stance here and pivoting closer towards the US. So this is just another act in a series of America capitalizing on the opportunity to establish sort of like trying to box in China here. We've already seen attempts in the AUKUS to bring in India, and India was quite receptive to it. So it's sort of making a triangle, sort of a triangle that can resist influence from Beijing emanating. So it's just another. I think it's a natural step in the ongoing tensions that's happening in the Indo-Pacific and the South China Sea, just to try to make sure that China is not able to capitalize on the slowly, how do you say, the hegemony America has established, the Western world has established, and slowly being chipped away, and China's trying to just take whatever is relevance is being lost from that side of the world. But it is quite concerning as well, because China would not take this lying down. It's also taken a lot of efforts in ensuring that they have their own allies in the South China Sea and East Asia. Of course, in East Asia, they would only have countries such as North Korea to help support them, which is why now there's a race towards Southeast Asia. And Malaysia, I think we've always played a very neutral stance. Of course, we had some moments where we kind of pivoted a bit more than usual. Philippines is a bit more drastic and more decisive in taking the stance. Vietnam, obviously, whatever is maintaining China's influence at an arm's length distance is always very beneficial for them. But there's always other countries in the region that's up for grabs in this whole grand game of chess between China and the Western powers. And it seems here that Japan wants to put Japan and America wants to put the Philippines in the spotlight here, and by all accounts, it seems to be a successful summit that was happening. So we could see the Philippines taking a more active role here, and Japan being more emboldened to act sort of like a proxy for America and building more confidence in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, this is another very ironic relationship. I would call it the toxic relationship between Japan and US, because Japan is the only country that was hit by two atomic bomb, and after that they were best friend. I mean, US play a big role in helping nurture Japan to the success that they have today. So it's a very unique relationship, but I don't think that same relationship, mutual relationship, also can be described into most country in, especially in Southeast Asia, because uh, China is one of the, if not, I think every Southeast Asia is biggest trading partner. So in terms of economic benefit, so China also play a role there. So even though they see China's aggression as a threat, but at the same time, they need we need one another. So because most of us are trading nations here, and I think even Japan have a quite big trade with China as well. So there's that. I mean, and then there's another proximity geography here. Like I'm just fantasizing where this region will be aligned more if US is not meddling into it. Like, I mean, if US not try to assert themselves and try to force these countries like Philippines or Japan to stand up against China, I think they would not do it themselves. I mean, Rodrigo Duterte recently in his interview regarding the summit, he said like Philippines would never wants to go against China, even the slightest. During his premiership, he never, uh, uh, have any problem with Beijing. But today, U.S. always try to poke at countries like Japan, South Korea, and Philippines to move a little bit inch by inch to rattle the Chinese, and this is because of the encouragement from Washington, and we need to be worried. We need to be wary also that any escalation in this region would be tremendously affecting one another, unlike in certain region maybe, because like I said, this we all need each other and we all trade with one another. So it's very crucial in terms of economic standpoint that we need to maintain peace at all costs. But America here, they seems to put their, well, America always put their interest first, isn't it? Like, so ASEAN leaders and also maybe the ASEAN Pacific leaders need to uh, also among them and discuss that, hey, how are we going to do about this? Because yeah, Australia maybe also on the side of America that try to encourage Japan, South Korea to go against China, but Australia is down far south. They are not the one that gonna have a direct impact into this. Fishing territory is gonna be a huge issue, and this will translate to economic benefit. And it's not gonna be U.S. and Australia that gonna have a dispute where we're gonna stop fishing, how we define our economic zone or whatsoever. So this kind of thing, I think, needs to be put forward, and ASEAN, because Malaysia is going to be the host of ASEAN, I think next year, more approach from the standpoint that solidarity needs to be there, not just among ASEAN, but a bit larger than that, with Japan, Korea, Taiwan, for example, if they see fit. So I'm reading to this that yes, you say that it's a natural way of respond to China growing hegemony, but also we need to think uh, s- from ASEAN or ASEAN Pacific side as well. Like I'm not saying that we should pick China over US or the other. I mean, it should be win-win situation to all of us, not just maybe Japan or South Korea. So I think reading into this, players like our immediate neighbors like India as well have their own uh, problem in their sphere with Pakistan or Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So we need to focus on ours, and America. We need to call America for whatever that, because we openly criticize America roles in, let's say, for in Ukraine, for example, with NATO involvement. What's behind all this agenda? I think the same thing also happening here, but no one seems to be talking about it as much because it's involving China, and we still have that maybe stigma that the China equal to communist, communist equal uh, something not good, evil, twisted power, if you may, for if some people may call that. So yeah, I think yes, China involvement is maybe not as uh, uh, favorable to some people, but we need to get the facts right and not just easily being poked or encouraged by America, so that we go into war or God forbid a real war, a physical war with China.
Yeah, I think when it comes to paranoia, whether or not war is inevitable or not, I think right now it's not so. I think the chances are quite low because if you look at the relationship between China and the US, they always have this back and forth kind of relationship. They would compete. They would always focus on competing with each other, but when necessary, they would confront. But they would never have any conflict in a way. They would always have pivot between these two modes here: the competition or confrontation. And it's I think there is nothing how do you say, there's no powder keg scenario right now that's feasible that would ignite that kind of situation where they would go to war unless the status quo in Taiwan is somehow compromised, and which is becoming a bit more getting a lot of people worried. But if it was going to happen, it would have happened. I think it would have happened quite a while ago in terms of something more substantive or something very drastic. But at the same time, when we look at these, the emphasis of bringing Southeast Asia here, it kind of it's always usually to the tune of non-Southeast Asian countries, non-ASEAN countries, and it's always, I feel, right, this rivalry between China and America always undermines ASEAN centrality. It undermines the ability for ASEAN to actually establish, to really hold its own as an organization within the region that actually has some kind of influence, actually has some kind of legitimacy to lobby or to even make a stance against these two competing powers. But I think this is somewhat of an inherent weakness with ASEAN because ASEAN has been criticized of being very toothless, not being able to resolve particular issues such as this. And usually the go-to strategy would be to build confidence and build capacity with all parties involved. And I don't see the ASEAN of today being as proactive as the ASEAN of even, let's see, 7 years ago, 8 years or 10 years ago, where there was always summits that was to be had, such as the Regional Forum, ASEAN Plus One, or the East Asia Summit, which ASEAN used to be quite active in pushing forwards. And this is a very dangerous situation because it means that we do not really have a unified voice on how these matters, these geopolitical matters, actually be done. And it kind of puts the emphasis more on the great powers here who seem to be calling all the shots through their own capability, through their own standing, or through their own allies, their own proxies as well. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this play out because China, Beijing would definitely have some kind of contingency if, let's say, India, Japan somehow joins the AUKUS, and I don't know what they would call it then. We'll maybe call it jacuzzi or something like that. Uh, and this would, China would definitely attempt to make its own security organization, and it would definitely see ASEAN, which, that hasn't had the best track record, and trying to be taken seriously. Maybe they would find a way to empower that. But of course, now that the Philippines and Vietnam has been very open in their anti-Beijing stance or anti-China influence in the South China Sea, I think this would put things at sort of like a deadlock, and it would take something very big to see the kind of shift. But I think as of now, with this kind of status quo, I think China would try to leverage more on its soft power rather than military power. I think in terms of military power, they have a lot of things that are happening in terms of enhancing it. Like now that they have reverse engineered a lot of military hardware from the US and have their own local grown military assets and hardware. I think they've covered the basis in terms of military projection. And I think they're going to move towards more of soft power projection, because that seems to be a very successful tactic for East Asian countries. Like Japan has succeeded in projecting soft power. South Korea has been able to do the same with K-pop and all the cultural emanation from those countries. I think China would double down on these kinds of efforts to show more, how do you say, goodwill for potential allies. Like we can see in Malaysia, especially in Sabah, a lot of investments from China are becoming more and more frequent. And of course, we have South Korea opening its own South Korean companies opening up their own copper foil plants here, and I think this would be the new trend going forward. If they're not able to box China in militarily speaking or in the hard way, I think China will try to slither in the soft way, and I think this would be a very good strategy, because instead of military confrontation in that sense, I think this would prove more beneficial for competition as well, as long as America is willing to play by the rules of the market here. But of course, now you see America doubling down on saying that TikTok is obviously spyware somehow, and calling the CEO of TikTok, what you said, of ByteDance for questioning in the Senate and whatever congressional hearing. I think America understands that China's soft power is another avenue which they have seemed to have neglected, and I think would try to isolate. And I think bringing the Philippines or India into the fold will allow more for the Western soft power, or even Japanese by proxy kind of soft power, to ebb and flow easier into the region.
Yeah, that's what the Silk Road 2.0 is all about, right? Like to project even more of a Chinese soft power. So by trade or by business, because they understand that's the real language that everyone can understand them. And this is more apparent in Africa and certain parts of Southeast Asia, even included in Malaysia as well. The high-speed rail is one of the biggest mega projects that's part of their initiative. So this is no small feat to China to actually do and project their soft power. But more importantly, also that the culture that we shared with China has more, I think, influence. Just like how what do you call the Anglosphere shed their own values, like Canada, US, UK, Australia. These are countries that binded by their own same values and culture. So in this part of region as well, we are more closer to China. Yes, we don't speak the same language. In fact, in this region is one of the most diverse languages we can have. Even though it's the area is maybe as big as North America, but it's more diverse in terms of ethnicity and languages. And we need to see a role in how culture can play into this, because even though, like, we understand, like, we have this what do you call diversification of our culture, but it's all rooted and came from mostly from China. Food, for example, we export a lot of that from China. In Indonesia, bakso origin from beef noodles, so, for example. So as trivial as this, but if you look more into it, we are more intertwined with our neighbors as China or Japan and in Vietnam as well, because you mentioned Vietnam just now. So Vietnam, as a communist leaning party, they also have some problem with Beijing in terms of the nine dash line claim. So I think the best way forward is to, like you said, I think keep it keep it stale. I mean, no move should be done into having solution, because any solution could be a zero sum game to certain countries. So just leave it as is, and as Rodrigo Duterte says that how he deal with China in the last 5 years he was the president. He just leave it as is, like whatever that China says, he just like yes, nodding to it, but it should not be at the price of Philippines. As long it doesn't stop the fishermen from Philippines to fish in certain areas, then it should be good. Whatever claim that China wants to do, let it be. They can claim as much as they want, but as long as they allow us to do some economic activity, it should be. I think that kind of approach is more beneficial to countries like smaller countries like us, Malaysia, because we also in the dispute of nine dash land for some certain economic area there, the especially alongside of Sarawak and Sabah. So reading into this, yes, Japan and Philippines so eager into so desperate. Even the Prime Minister of Japan also, like he went to the Arlington Memorial. This Adi, it's the memorial for those who died bombing Japan in the World War II, and you have the great grandchildren came to, well, not maybe great grandchildren of Japan.
You're going to your abusers basically.
Yeah, you're going to
You're
your
going to
abusers,
visit your abusers.
and you're giving a bow. Japanese giving a bow to the killers of your grandfather. So yeah, like I said, I maintain that toxic relationship Japan has with America, but so far it worked. But I don't know, will it work any longer with America as superpower counting their days? Uh, of course, we've been people been long talking about like how China gonna replace US as number one, but we yet see how China actually as number one, how they will act as a superpower number one in the world. Would they follow suit as to what America did for the last 250 years? Would it be? I don't know. So that's a remains to be seen. And in AUKUS or in any like security pact, I think ASEAN should make a stand, get stand clear into this, because it's definitely involving our region, and an attack or any um, so-called transgression into any of our region, we need to be dealt as one, as ASEAN. Then that's including Philippines. So yeah, that's my take on it. Any last word on this topic?
Yeah, I think it's important that we, especially Malaysia, because we have a very balanced relationship between America and China here. Like you mentioned, the historical importance of the relationship between China and Malaysia. Like back then, a lot of the Malay kings could only gain a lot of their legitimacy if the Chinese, the Ming dynasty or the Yuan dynasty, granted them that legitimacy and support as a client state, right? So it is something that we need to address, that we cannot divorce the relationship between Malaysia and China at all. I mean, historically, Malaysia was one of the, I think, the first few countries that actually opened up official diplomatic visit to China. And I think we need to, as Malaysia, be more active in our multilateral efforts here. It's because when we look at the ASEAN platform, right, it's mostly being carried by Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam, and Thailand. Singapore only really comes out when Timor Leste's membership status is somehow, I mean, the potential of Timor Leste being brought into ASEAN, then Singapore will show up. But Malaysia, we should be a bit more vocal and more open about it. I would like to see the Prime Minister being more hands-on with this kind of this multilateral platform, because he did give quite a speech when he was visiting the UN and was interviewed about the South China Sea, right? So it would be nice to see a prime, because he did want to prioritize foreign investment coming into Malaysia. So that means you're going to have to leave a bigger foreign footprint in terms of your engagement with other countries. And I think ASEAN would be a very great platform to bring that kind of investment, because the potential for ASEAN still hasn't been realized through its three pillars: security pillar, the economic pillar, and the cultural pillar. Especially for the economic pillar, there's so much market here in Southeast Asia, which just requires a leading country to be very bold to speak out about it and to speak up why ASEAN really is important. But I remember when I was attending the ASEAN Regional Forum last year in Kuala Lumpur, and the Prime Minister was giving the keynote speech. He did, even though he emphasized the multilateralism of ASEAN, he kind of played down the importance of minilateral organizations such as BIMPIAGA, or the Trilateral Security Committee, and which is, I mean, if you're going to emphasize ASEAN more, then I think more effort should be, how do you say, you walk the talk essentially. And who knows, maybe in the next 2 years, I would like to see the Foreign Service be more proactive under the leadership of Anwar Ibrahim, because all I've seen so far is just state visits here and there, but never uh, playing that huge role in international summits or international forums. So I hope that would be the case, because it would be a shame. Like, Anwar himself is a very competent leader, so I want to see him navigate the international community, especially in Southeast Asia, more competently. So that's all I can say.
And that's all the time that we have for this topic. Next one, we're going to talk about something closer to home, a recent issue, especially in Ramadan month, very interestingly coincide with Ramadan. So what's that coming up next in the next episode?